I didn't plan to save him. I didn't even know his name. All I knew was that the room had shifted, and something in my chest shifted with it, like a warning I didn't have words for yet. My mouth opened before my mind could stop it. He's my husband. 5 seconds of silence. The most dangerous man in the room. And he didn't correct me. But let me take you back. 20 minutes earlier, I was supposed to be gone. I'd been hired last minute. Touch-ups for 3 women at a private dinner. The kind of event with no address until the morning of. I'd done the hair, collected my fee, should have left. But the room felt wrong in a way I couldn't name. Too quiet where it should have been loud. Too still where it should have moved. So I stayed. That was my first mistake. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. Wasn't trying to be. He stood slightly apart. Tall, composed, dressed in all black. No drink in his hand. No performance in his posture. Just watching. I told myself he was nobody. I was wrong about that too. Then the other man moved. He was tall, lighter suit, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. He drifted toward the man in black, unhurried, deliberate, like a man walking toward something he'd already decided to take. I couldn't hear the words from where I stood, but I watched his hand. He set it briefly on the shoulder of another guest nearby, a small gesture, casual, but his eyes never left Hein-Jin, claiming the room one person at a time, showing everyone watching exactly who held the most ground. That's when I understood. This wasn't a conversation, it was a demonstration. I knew pressure when I saw it. I'd grown up reading rooms, small apartments, loud family dinners, spaces where everything important lived in what wasn't said. The smiling man said something and tilted his head, waiting. And in that waiting, I felt it. The shift. Like the room had quietly turned. Like the man in black had just been handed a question he couldn't answer without losing something. No partner, no anchor, no one standing beside him. My feet moved before I gave them permission. I crossed the room, slid my hand into his arm like I'd done it 1,000 times, turned to the smiling man with a calm I didn't feel. Sorry, did I keep you waiting? The smiling man blinked. The man in black went absolutely still beside me. Not tense, just arrested. I kept my eyes on the smiling man. I wasn't aware, he said slowly, that Hein-Jin had a wife. I let the word land easy, natural. We keep things quiet. You understand. Silence. He looked at Hein-Jin. Hein-Jin said nothing. He didn't correct me. That was the moment. That single suspended beat where he could have stepped back. Laughed it off, handled it his own way. He didn't. His arm shifted. Barely. Just enough to close the gap between us. Just enough to make the lie look like memory. The smiling man's smile returned. Smaller. Now. Different. Of course, he said. Forgive me. He moved away. The room exhaled. I loosened my grip on Hein-Jin's arm and turned to leave. His voice stopped me. Low. Quiet. No volume needed. Your name. Not a question. I looked at him fully for the first time. He was closer than I expected. Dark eyes steady on my face. Not grateful. Not warm. Just reading me. Tayana, I said. A pause that lasted slightly too long. You shouldn't have done that, he said. You're welcome, I replied. He was quiet for a beat. Then, almost to himself. You have no idea what you just stepped into. Something about the way he said it made my stomach drop. Not a threat. A warning. I walked away anyway. Didn't look back. But I felt it. His eyes on me long after I'd gone. Not the way men usually watch. Different. Like I'd just become a problem he hadn't planned for. Outside, the night air hit my face. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs and breathed. Just a strange night, I told myself. One you'll move past by morning. I believed it. I was wrong. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in pieces. The room, the smiling man, the way Hein-Jin's arm had shifted, barely, to close the gap between us. You have no idea what you just stepped into. I told myself it was nothing. By morning, I almost believed it. I had a client at 9, a birthday blowout in Flatbush. I focused on that. Packed my kit, made coffee, moved through my apartment like the night before hadn't happened. Then someone knocked on my door. Not loud, Not frantic, just certain, the kind of knock that already knows you're home. I stood in my kitchen for a full 3 seconds before I moved. Something in my body recognized it before my brain did. That feeling again. The same one from last night. Wrong. Off. Pay attention. I opened the door. He was standing there in a dark coat, hands in his pockets, completely still. No entourage, no explanation. Just him, filling the doorframe like he'd always known where I lived. A man like him could find anyone. That thought arrived cold. "How do you know where I live?" I said. "May I come in?" That wasn't what I asked. He looked at me for a moment, patient, unbothered. "No," he said simply. It wasn't. He stepped inside anyway. I should have blocked him. Should have said something sharp and final. Instead, I stepped back, just slightly, and hated myself for it. He looked around my apartment the way he'd looked around that room last night, taking inventory, not judging, just seeing. "Sit down," I said, "since you're already in." He didn't sit. "The man from last night," he said. "His name is Kwon Suk Jin. He has been looking for a reason to move against me for 2 years. That sounds like your problem. It was. He turned to look at me directly. You made it ours. I crossed my arms. I don't have a ours with you. I don't even know you. You told a room full of powerful people that you're my wife. I was trying to help. I know. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness exactly. More like acknowledgement. By this morning, 3 people had already asked questions. By tonight, there will be more. Kwon doesn't let things go. He will investigate, and when he finds nothing, he'll know I lied. He'll know we lied. He paused. And in my world, that is not embarrassing. It is dangerous. The word landed differently than I expected. Not dramatic, just factual. The way you'd say rain or traffic. I sat down on the arm of my sofa, not because I was calm, because my legs needed a moment. What exactly are you saying? He was quiet for a beat, measuring something. I'm saying the lie needs to become the truth. I stared at him. You're serious. I don't say things I don't mean. You want to marry me. I said it flat. Like repeating it would reveal the absurdity. You don't know my last name. Smith, he said. Tayana Smith, 28. Mobile. Hairdresser. You've lived in this apartment for 3 years. Before that, Crown Heights. The air left the room. You had me investigated. I had you identified. He said it like there was a difference. Last night, after you left. I stood up. Get out. Tayana, I said get out. My voice was steady. That surprised me. You show up at my door, you walk into my home, you tell me you've been digging through my life, and then you want me to marry you? I want you to be safe. Something about the way he said it made me pause, not the words, the way they came out. Quiet, direct. Like he wasn't performing concern. He was just stating it. The same way he'd stated everything else. No decoration, just truth. I almost softened. Almost. From what? I said. A problem I wouldn't have if I'd just gone home? He didn't answer immediately. That silence said everything. Yes, he said finally. Exactly that. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't threatening, wasn't charming his way through this. He was just standing in my living room telling me an ugly truth, without decorating it. I almost respected that. Almost. I'm not marrying a stranger, I said. I don't care what's at stake. Then consider what happens if you don't. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a card on my kitchen counter. Plain. Just a number. Kwon already has your name. He already knows what you look like. The only question now is whether you face what's coming alone, or with someone who can actually handle it. He walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. You stepped into that room last night because you saw something that needed fixing. He didn't turn around. That's not nothing. That's not the kind of person who walks away from a problem. He left. Door closed quietly behind him. I stood there for a long time. The card sat on my counter. Small, white, unremarkable. I didn't pick it up, but I didn't throw it away either. Hello and welcome to Afro-Korean Series channel. It's great to have you here. Do stick around. Thanks. I lasted 4 days. 4 days of telling myself it wasn't my problem. 4 days of early clients and late nights, and keeping my hands busy so my mind wouldn't wander back to a white card sitting on my kitchen counter. I didn't pick it up, but I didn't throw it away either. On the third day, my cousin Denise called. Girl. Just that. One word. The way she said it told me everything. Why is somebody asking questions about you at Auntie's church? I sat down slowly. What kind of questions? The kind people don't ask unless they already know the answers. Her voice dropped. Tayana, what did you do? I told her it was nothing. She didn't believe me. I almost didn't believe me either. The fourth day, it got worse. I was packing up after a client in Bed-Stuy when a man appeared at the end of the hallway. Suit, calm face, hands folded in front of him like he had nowhere else to be. He wasn't threatening. That was the threatening part. Quan already had more on me than I realized. Enough to know where I'd be that day. Enough to send someone who looked like he belonged everywhere. Miss Smith, he said pleasantly, do you have a moment? No, I said, kept walking. Mr. Quan just has a few questions about your husband. I stopped, didn't turn around. He's very curious, the man continued, about how long you've been married, where you met, small things. A pause. He's a detail-oriented man. I turned then, looked at him directly. Tell Mr. Quan, I said carefully, that my husband handles his own correspondence. I walked out, got to my car, locked the door, sat there for 60 seconds with my hands on the wheel and my heart doing something loud and unsteady in my chest. Then I picked up my phone. He answered on the second ring. No greeting, just, where are you? Bed-Stuy. My voice came out steadier than I felt. One of Quan's men just approached me outside a client's building. Silence. Not the empty kind. The kind where someone is thinking very fast and very quietly. Go home, he said. I'll come to you. I haven't agreed to anything. I know. Another pause. Go home, Tayana. He hung up. I went home. He arrived 40 minutes later. This time he knocked differently, still certain, but something in it was less formal. Like the first visit had established something between us neither of us had named yet. I opened the door before he could knock again. He looked at me, took in my face. Whatever he saw there made something in his jaw tighten. Did he touch you? No. Did he threaten you? No. He was polite. I stepped back to let him in. That almost made it worse. It was meant to. He came in. Same dark coat, same stillness. But tonight it felt different inside my apartment. Less like an intrusion, more like something I hadn't decided how to name yet. I made tea. I don't know why. My hands needed something to do. He actually sat this time, at my small kitchen table, watched me move around the space without saying anything. You lasted longer than I expected, he said finally. 4 days. I gave you 3. I looked at him over my shoulder. You were counting? Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. I was aware, he said. I set 2 cups on the table and sat across from him. The card was still on the counter behind me. We both knew it. Tell me what this looks like, I said. Practically. If I agree. He folded his hands on the table. A legal marriage. Registered. On paper and in appearance. For how long? Long enough for Quan to lose interest and redirect his attention. And if he doesn't lose interest? He will. Certain. Flat. I'll make sure of it. I wrapped both hands around my cup. Where would I live? With me. Appearances matter in my world. A wife who lives separately raises questions. I have clients, a schedule. I'm not giving up my work. I'm not asking you to. I looked at him. What are you asking me to give up? He held my gaze. Privacy. Comfort. The version of your life where this isn't complicated. At least he was honest. And what do I get? I said. Protection, resources, and when it's over, a settlement. Enough to buy the salon you've been renting chairs in for 3 years. Of course he knew that too. I should have been surprised. I wasn't. Not anymore. That was just who he was. A man who didn't walk into any room without knowing everything about it first. I was weary of it, but I understood it. Where I came from, knowing more than the other person was the only thing that kept you safe. I want it in writing, I said. Everything. The timeline. The settlement. What's expected of me and what isn't. already prepared. He'd prepared this before I even picked up the phone. Of course he had. He reached into his coat and placed a folded document on the table between us. Clean, precise. I pulled it. I pulled, toward me, and read it slowly. Every line. He didn't rush me, didn't shift or check his phone or perform patience. He just waited. That was its own kind of unnerving. The terms were exactly what he'd said. Nothing hidden. Nothing that took more than it offered. I read it twice. Then I looked up. He was already watching me, not with cold calculation, something quieter, something that felt almost like curiosity, like I was a problem he genuinely didn't know the answer to yet. Why me? I said. What do you mean? You could have denied it that night, handled it your own way. Why let the lie stand? He was quiet for a moment. Because you were the only person in that room who moved without being told to. He said it simply, like it was just a fact. Everyone else waits to be told where to stand. You just moved. Something about that landed in a place I wasn't prepared for. I looked back down at the document, picked up the pen he'd placed beside it. When had he done that? And signed my name at the bottom, slid it back across the table. He looked at the signature, then at me. Neither of us spoke. The silence between us was different from all the silences before it. Not tense, not cold, just full. Like something had shifted in the room and we were both pretending not to feel it. So, I said finally, I guess we're getting married. He held my gaze a beat too long. I guess we are, he said quietly. I picked up my tea. My hands weren't shaking, but something else was. Something I wasn't ready to name yet. The wedding was quiet. A courthouse. A Tuesday morning. 2 witnesses Hein Jin produced from somewhere I didn't ask about. With him, some things just appeared. I wore a cream blouse and my good earrings, the gold hoops my mother gave me when I turned 25. Hein Jin wore all black as usual. The judge was efficient. The whole thing took 11 minutes. 11 minutes to change everything. Afterward, standing on the courthouse steps in the thin morning light, Hein Jin looked at me and said, "Are you hungry?" I almost laughed. "That's what you're leading with?" "You didn't eat this morning." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" He didn't answer. Just started walking toward the car. I followed him. That felt significant somehow. The following. Like something I'd have to get used to. Moving into his apartment was its own kind of quiet shock. Everything was clean lines and dark wood and silence that felt intentional, like the space had been designed to keep the world out. I put my things in the room he'd prepared and stood in the doorway for a moment, just adjusting to the stillness, to the fact that this was real now. 11 minutes and a signature, and here I was. His family came first, 3 days after the courthouse. A dinner at a restaurant so quiet it felt like a library, the kind of place where the menus had no prices because the people eating there never needed to ask. His mother arrived first. Mrs. Chan was small, precise, the kind of woman who had decided everything about you before you sat down. She wore pale gray and very little jewelry, and looked at me the way people look at something they're trying to find fault with, but haven't located yet. She would find it. I already knew that. His uncle came next. Then 2 cousins. I couldn't tell apart. They all had the same quality, contained, measured, like emotion was something that happened to other people. Hein Jin seated me beside him without asking. His hand brushed the back of my chair as I sat. Small, barely anything, but his mother saw it. The dinner moved in careful, polite conversation, in Korean mostly, with occasional English directed at me like a courtesy they hadn't fully committed to. His mother asked where I was from. I told her. Caribbean family, born in Brooklyn. She nodded once, said nothing. His uncle asked what I did. I'm a hairdresser, I said. Didn't dress it up. Didn't apologize for it. Something shifted at the table, subtle. The kind of shift that happens when people confirm what they already suspected. I felt it land on my skin like a temperature change. Hein Jin's voice came out even and unbothered. She runs her own business, has for 4 years. I looked at him. He wasn't looking at me. He was reaching for his water glass like he'd said nothing remarkable. But he had. His mother moved the conversation elsewhere, gracefully, deliberately. The way women like her redirected things, not with confrontation, just a turn so smooth you almost didn't feel the door closing. By the end of dinner, I understood exactly where I stood in that room. Temporary, tolerated, a problem they were confident would correct itself. I smiled through all of it, smiled until my face felt like a mask I'd borrowed from someone else. In the car afterward, Hein Jin was quiet for a long time. Then, "You handled that well?" "I've been handled worse," I said. He glanced at me. Something in his expression shifted. Not pity. Something more careful than that. He didn't push it. I was grateful. My family was louder. My mother found out on a Saturday. I hadn't planned to tell her, not yet. But Denise had a mouth like an open window, and by noon, half the family knew. My mother called 7 times before I picked up. "Tayana Renee Smith. Hi, Mama." "Don't you hi, Mama me." I could hear her moving through the house, fast. The way she moved when she had feelings too big, for standing still. "You got married? To a Korean man? A rich Korean man? And nobody, not one person in this family." "Mama, your grandmother is crying, Tayana. She is sitting in her good chair crying. Is she sad or happy?" A pause. Happy. But that is not the point. I closed my eyes, smiled despite myself. The family dinner happened the following Sunday. My mother's house in Flatbush. Full spread, rice and peas, oxtail, plantain, the good ginger beer she only brought out for occasions. Hein Jin arrived exactly on time. My mother opened the door and looked at him for a full 5 seconds. He met her gaze without flinching. Something in her face decided something. "Come in," she said. Not warm yet, but open. He brought flowers, birds of paradise, deep orange. My mother noticed, put them in water without saying anything about them. But she put them in the good vase. The family was everything his wasn't. Loud, overlapping, opinions arriving before they were invited. My aunties asked questions that weren't questions. My Uncle James talked at Hein Jin for 20 minutes about the 1998 World Cup without pausing for breath. Hein Jin listened to every word, asked one question at the end, specific, genuine, and my uncle's face opened up like a window. I didn't forget it. Then my mother found me in the kitchen. She looked at me the way only mothers can, past the face I was showing and straight into the one I was hiding. "Are you happy?" she said. Simple, direct. No performance. "It's complicated, Mama." "That's not what I asked." I looked down at the counter. "I don't know yet." She was quiet for a moment. Then she put her hand on my face, warm, certain, the hand that had fixed everything that could be fixed my entire life. "He watches you," she said quietly. "The whole time he's been here. When you're not looking, he watches you." I didn't say anything. "That's not nothing," she said. She went back to the food. I stood there in her kitchen with the smell of oxtail and ginger in the air, and something pressing quietly against the inside of my chest. Later that night, Hein Jin and I drove back in silence. Comfortable silence. The kind that surprised me. I was staring out the window when he said, "Your mother." "What about her?" "She's sharp." "The sharpest person I know," I said. "A beat." "She asked me something," he said, "when you were in the kitchen." I turned to look at him. What did she ask? The city lights moved across his face. Slow, gold and shadow. She asked if I understood what I had. My breath caught. He didn't look at me, just kept his eyes on the road. "What did you say?" I asked. A long pause. I said I was beginning to. The car moved through the dark, and neither of us said anything else. But something had changed in the silence between us. Something neither of us was ready to name. But it was there. Quietly. Certainly. It was there. 3 weeks into the marriage, I almost forgot to be afraid. Almost. Life had settled into something that looked from the outside like normal. I kept my clients, kept my schedule, drove myself to appointments the way I always had. Kit in the back seat, playlists loud, windows down when the weather allowed. Hein Jin didn't crowd me. That surprised me most. I'd expected control, rules, a list of things a wife in his world was supposed to do and not do. Instead, he gave me space. Real space. The kind that didn't come with conditions attached. We had dinner together most evenings. Quiet meals, good food. He cooked, which I hadn't expected, with the same precision he brought to everything. We talked, Not deeply, not yet, but easily. The way two people talk when they're still learning the shape of each other. I was beginning to feel something I didn't trust. Comfortable. Quan had been quiet. Too quiet. I'd told myself that was good. That maybe the marriage had worked. That maybe he'd looked at the paperwork and the courthouse record and decided the math didn't add up to an opportunity anymore. I was wrong about that. I found out on a Wednesday. Hein-Jin came home late. Later than usual. He moved through the apartment with that particular stillness that meant something was being contained. I'd learned to read him in 3 weeks. Not fully, not deeply, but enough. I looked up from the sofa. What happened? He set his phone on the counter, didn't answer immediately. Hein-Jin. He turned. His face was composed, but his eyes were doing something different. Quan has been talking to people from your past, he said. A former landlord, a former co-worker. He paused. Those were manageable. It was the third one that matters. The room tilted slightly. He found Matthew, I said. Not a question. Hein-Jin was still. Who is Matthew? I set down my book, took a breath, looked at the window instead of his face. Someone I was with for 2 years. It ended badly. I paused. I lent him money I didn't have. He didn't pay it back. There were other things. What other things? Things that made me look foolish, I said. Things that made me look like someone who makes bad choices. I finally looked at him. Is that what Quan is using? He's building a picture, Hein-Jin said carefully, of someone unstable, financially reckless, easily manipulated. His jaw was tight. He's going to present it to certain people, suggest that I was either deceived or compromised in my judgment. I stood up. And are you? I said. Compromised in your judgment? No. Then why does it matter what he says? Because perception is everything in my world. He met my eyes. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be believable. I crossed my arms. So what do you want me to say? That I'm sorry I had a hard few years? That I'm sorry I trusted someone I shouldn't have? I don't want you to say anything. Then, what are you here telling me for? The question landed sharp. He looked at me for a long moment. Because I found out, and you didn't tell me. His voice was still even, still controlled, but something underneath it had an edge now. I told you from the beginning. Quan looks for gaps. Anything I don't know about you is a gap he can use. I'm not your case file, I said. I'm not obligated to hand you my worst moments so you can manage them. No, he said, but you are my wife. The word landed differently now than it had at the courthouse. Heavier, more complicated. On paper, I said. He didn't respond to that. The silence stretched. I turned toward the window. The city outside was bright and indifferent. Cars moving, lives happening, none of them aware of this particular room and what was sitting in the air between us. His name was Matthew. We met when I was 24. I was trying to open my first salon. He said he believed in me. I kept my voice flat, clinical. He borrowed $40,000 worth of believing. Nothing from Hein-Jin. I lost the salon, lost the money, lost 2 years. I turned back to face him. It took me a long time to get back to functional. That's what Quan found. That version of me. The one that was still climbing back up. Hein-Jin was watching me in that way he had. The reading way. The way that felt like being seen further than you'd given permission for. He'll talk? He said quietly. Matthew. For the right price? Yes. He'll talk. Something moved through Hein-Jin's expression. Fast. Dark. Gone before I could name it fully. He picked up his phone from the counter. Made a call. Short. In Korean. His voice low and precise. 3 sentences. Maybe 4. Then he set the phone back down. What was that? I said. Matthew won't be talking to anyone. I stared at him. What did you do? Nothing that requires explaining. He met my eyes. He had outstanding debts of his own. They've been brought to his attention. I'd spent years cleaning up what Matthew left behind. Hein-Jin erased it in 40 seconds. I didn't know whether to be relieved or unsettled. Both. Maybe. You can't just... I started. I can, he said simply. And I did. He wasn't performing power, wasn't showing off. He just handled it. The same way he handled everything. Quietly. Completely. I sat back down on the sofa. The anger was still there. But under it, something else had moved in. something I didn't have a clean word for. He crossed the room, not toward me, toward the kitchen, thinking through something he wasn't ready to say out loud. "I'm not angry at you," he said finally, back still to me. "About Matthew, about the money, about any of it." "You seemed angry." "I was angry that I didn't know." He turned then, looked at me directly. "There's a difference." I held his gaze. "If there are other things," he said, "other gaps, tell me. Not because I'll judge them." A pause. "Because I can't protect what I can't see." The room was quiet. Something about the way he said, protect, not manage, not handle, settled in my chest like something finally settling. I looked at him for a long moment. "There are no other gaps," I said. He nodded once, turned back to the kitchen. "Dinner in 20 minutes," he said, like that, just forward. I sat with the feeling in my chest, turned it over quietly, looked at the shape of it. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It wasn't trust yet either, but it was the beginning of something, and for the first time since I'd signed that paper, I wasn't sure I wanted it to end. The days after were quiet. Too quiet. Not the comfortable kind we'd built over 3 weeks. This was different. This was the quiet of two people being careful, moving around each other like there was something fragile on the floor neither of us wanted to step on. After Wednesday, I'd needed the distance, needed to feel like I still had some walls left. I told myself it was fine. It wasn't fine. I threw myself into work, back-to-back clients, early mornings, late returns. I came home tired enough that conversation wasn't required and sleep came fast, and I didn't have to sit with the feeling I'd been carrying since Wednesday night. The feeling that I'd shown him something I hadn't planned to show anyone. Hein Jin didn't push, didn't try to close the distance I was putting between us. He just waited. The way he always waited. Patient and still and present in a way that was somehow more unsettling than if he'd pushed. I almost wished he'd push. At least then I'd have something to be angry about. It cracked on a Thursday. I came home later than usual. Difficult client. Long drive back. I dropped my kit by the door and pulled my hair loose and stood in the kitchen drinking water straight from the glass, like I was the only person in the apartment. I wasn't. Hein Jin was at the kitchen table, papers spread in front of him. Reading glasses I hadn't seen before. Dark frames, slightly too serious for his face. He looked up when I came in. I looked at the glasses. "You wear glasses." "For reading." He said it like it was unremarkable. "I didn't know that." "You didn't ask." I put my glass down. Something about the exchange loosened a small knot in my chest. Just slightly. Just enough. I sat down at the table across from him. He went back to his papers. I watched him read for a moment, the way his eyes moved across the page, focused, unhurried, like whatever was happening between us wasn't sitting in the room at all. "I'm not good at this," I said. He didn't look up. "At what?" "At being seen." I said it to the table. "I'm good at seeing other people, reading rooms, reading situations. But when it goes the other way," I stopped. "I close." He was quiet, still reading, or pretending to. "I know," he said finally. I looked up. "You know?" He set down the paper, took off the glasses, looked at me directly. "The first week you were here," he said, "you rearranged the kitchen." I blinked. "What?" "The mugs. They were in the cabinet above the stove. You moved them to the one beside the window." A pause. "Because the morning light hits that side of the kitchen first, and you drink your coffee before 6. I stared at him. "You noticed that." "I notice everything about you." He said it simply, like it was just a fact. No performance, no agenda, just true. "Your last client on Fridays always runs long. You come home and you roll your shoulders twice before you put your kit down. When you're bothered by something, you clean things that aren't dirty." The kitchen was very clean right now. We both knew it. I didn't know what to do with that, being known that clearly by someone who wasn't supposed to. Something moved through me that I wasn't ready for. Not warmth exactly. Something more exposing than that. "Why?" I said. "Why what?" "Why are you paying that much attention?" He held my gaze. Didn't answer immediately. That pause was its own kind of answer. "Because you matter," he said quietly. "In this arrangement or outside of it, you matter, and things that matter deserve attention." The room was very still. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had walked into my apartment uninvited, who had turned my life sideways with a contract and a courthouse, who cooked dinner with precision and handled threats in 40 seconds, and wore reading glasses that were slightly too serious for his face, who had been watching me, not surveilling, seeing. Nobody does that, I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. Just notices without wanting something back. I want something back, he said. My heart did something unsteady. What? I said. He looked at me for a beat that lasted too long. I want you to stop running, he said. Every time something gets close, you move, you fill your schedule, you clean things. He tilted his head slightly. You're doing it right now. I'm sitting still, I said. Your hands aren't. I looked down. He was right. I pressed them flat on the table. The silence between us changed shape, became something warmer, more dangerous. He reached across the table, not for my hand, just close. Set his own hand on the table near mine, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth of it. I'm not Matthew, he said. 3 words. They landed somewhere deep and specific, in the exact place I hadn't known I was guarding. My throat tightened. I know, I said. Do you? I looked at his hand near mine, the small, careful distance between them. I'm working on it, I said honestly. Something in his face shifted, opened slightly, the way a window opens in a room that's been closed too long. He picked up his glasses, put them back on, looked back at his papers, like the moment was over, but the hand stayed where it was, close to mine, not touching, not withdrawing, just there, patient and certain, the way he was about everything. I sat there for a while, didn't reach for my phone, didn't find something to clean, didn't build distance between us with motion and busyness. I just sat, with him, in the warm quiet of the kitchen with the city outside, doing its indifferent thing, and his hand near mine, and something between us that had shifted too far to shift back. I didn't name it. But I stopped running from it. For tonight, at least, I stopped. The invitation came on a Friday, a formal dinner, hosted by Heinjin's mother. The kind of event that arrived in an actual envelope, cream paper, precise lettering, hand-delivered by someone whose entire job was discretion. Heinjin handed it to me without comment. I read it twice. Your mother is hosting a dinner. Yes, for us, for family, a pause, and guests. Something in the way he said guests sat wrong, but I didn't push it. I'd learned by then that Heinjin said exactly as much as he meant to say. If he'd wanted me to know more, he'd have told me. I wore my good dress, deep burgundy, the one that made me feel like I belonged in rooms I hadn't been invited to. I did my own hair, took my time, told myself it was armor. The restaurant was the same one as the first family dinner, same quiet, same absence of prices on the menu, same temperature. Not cold exactly, just calibrated, set to a degree that reminded you exactly how much effort it would take to be warm here. His mother greeted us at the entrance. She looked at me the way she always looked at me, evaluating, patient, like she was waiting for me to confirm something she'd already decided. Tayana. My name in her mouth was always just slightly too precise, like she was being careful not to mispronounce something she didn't intend to keep. Mrs. Chan, I smiled, put everything I had into it. We were seated, the usual family, the usual careful conversation. And then the guests arrived. She was Korean, of course she was. Tall, polished. The ease of someone who already knew how this would end. She wore ivory and moved like someone who had always known exactly which rooms she belonged in. Her family, her credentials, her connection to a business alliance that would be very beneficial. All of it delivered by Heinjin's mother with the smooth precision of someone who had been planning this for a long time. I understood immediately. This was not a family dinner. This was a demonstration. I sat very still, kept my face arranged, watched the woman take the seat across from Heinjin, placed there deliberately, I had no doubt, and smile at him with the easy confidence of someone who had been told she was the answer to a question still being asked. Heinjin's face revealed nothing, but he didn't look at me. That was its own answer. The dinner moved, courses arrived, conversation flowed in Korean and English both, and I participated where I could, and smiled where I couldn't, and the whole time I felt it. The slow, deliberate pressure of the message being delivered. She is what you should have chosen. She is what you could still choose. This one beside you is temporary. We've been patient, but patience has a shape, and tonight, you're looking at it. I had counted the exit twice. I made it through dessert. In the car afterward, neither of us spoke for a long time. The city moved past the windows, dark and lit and indifferent. Finally, I said, "You knew." "I suspected." "That's not a no." He was quiet. "Hein Jin." My voice came out even. I was proud of that. "Did you know your mother was going to do that tonight?" I knew she'd been making arrangements. He kept his eyes on the road. I didn't know the specifics. "The specifics?" I repeated it flat. "You mean the woman in ivory who your mother seated directly across from you and introduced like a resume?" "Nothing." "Right," I said. I turned back to the window. We drove the rest of the way in silence. I started packing at midnight. Not everything, just enough. A bag. The things that were mine before any of this started. My kit, my good earrings. The things that would remind me who I was when I got back to being just myself again. I was pulling clothes from the wardrobe when the bedroom door opened. Hein Jin stood in the doorway. He looked at the bag, then at me. "Don't," he said. "I'm not doing this," I said. "I'm not sitting at tables where I'm being replaced in real time. I'm not being someone's object lesson in what you should have chosen. I'm not." My voice cracked, just slightly. I hated it. "I'm not doing that again." "Again," he said quietly. I looked at him. "This has happened to you before," he said. "Someone choosing someone else. Someone making you feel. Don't." Now it was my turn. "Don't read me right now. I don't want to be read right now." He was quiet. A beat of silence. Then he stepped into the room. "I didn't choose her," he said. "You didn't stop it either." "No." He said it clean. No defense. "I didn't. And I should have." I stopped moving. That stopped me. The lack of argument. The clean admission. I'd been braced for defense, for explanation, for the careful management I'd come to expect from men when they'd done something wrong. He just admitted it. "It won't happen again," he said. "You can't promise that. Your mother, my mother doesn't make decisions about my life." Something in his voice had changed. Quieter, more final. "She never has. I've allowed her to believe otherwise because it was easier. That ends now." I looked at him standing in the doorway of this bedroom in this apartment that wasn't mine. This life that had a contract with an end date. This man who wore reading glasses that were too serious for his face and cooked with precision, and had noticed which cabinet I moved the mugs to and why. "I don't know what we're doing," I said. Honest. Raw. "I don't know what this is anymore." "Neither do I," he said. That surprised me. "But I know what it isn't," he continued. "It isn't nothing. And I know what I don't want." He looked at the bag in my hands. "I don't want you to leave." "Give me a reason to stay," I said. "A real one, not the contract, not Quan, not the arrangement." The room was very still. He crossed it. Stopped in front of me. Close. Closer than he'd stood before outside of performance and necessity. Close enough that I could see the specific way he was looking at me. Not calculating. Not managing. Just wanting. "Because when you're not here," he said quietly, "the apartment is just a space again." He paused. "You made it something else. I didn't ask you to. You just did." My throat was tight. "That's not a reason," I said. My voice barely made it out. "That's a feeling." "Yes," he said simply. "It is." I'd asked for a reason. He gave me the only one that actually meant anything. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I set the bag down. Didn't unpack it. Not yet. But I set it down. He didn't reach for me. Didn't push. Just stood there in the dark of the room with the city light coming through the curtain and something open in his face that I hadn't seen before. Something that looked quietly and unmistakably like relief. "Okay," I said finally. "Okay." He exhaled. Just barely. But I heard it. And in that small, careful sound, everything shifted. 3 days after the packing scene, the apartment felt different, not dramatically, not in ways I could point to and name, just lighter somehow, like something that had been held at a careful distance had been allowed, finally, to sit down. We didn't talk about what happened in the bedroom. Didn't need to. Some things don't need words once they've been said. The bag had gone back into the wardrobe. I was still here. He knew what that meant. I knew what that meant. We just moved forward. Carefully, but forward. Kwan moved on a Tuesday. I found out the way I found out most things in Hein Jin's world. Not directly, not immediately, but through the particular quality of his silence when he came home that evening. I was in the kitchen, finishing a client call. I heard the door, heard his keys on the counter. Didn't hear him move after that. I came out of the kitchen and found him standing at the window, still. The city behind him orange and gray in the early evening light, his jacket still on, like he hadn't decided yet whether he was staying. "Kwan?" I said, not a question. He turned, looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before on his face. Not controlled, not composed, tired. "He's going public," Hein Jin said. "Tomorrow. A carefully placed story, your financial history, the salon that failed, Matthew, all of it framed to suggest I married someone unstable to hide a larger instability in my own operations." I sat down slowly on the arm of the sofa. "He's not just coming after me," I said. "No, you're the door. I'm what's behind it." He turned back to the window. "If the story lands, and it will land, he has the right people placed. Everything I've spent 12 years building starts to move. Associates begin asking questions. 3 pending agreements fall apart. And if that happens, others move in. Flat. Final. That's how it works." I sat with that for a moment. "What are your options?" I said. He was quiet. That quiet was different from his usual quiet. This one had weight in it. "I have one option that ends this cleanly," he said, "that removes you from the narrative entirely. That gives Kwan nothing to work with and stabilizes everything before the story runs." I already knew what it was. "End the marriage," I said. "Yes." "And me?" "Protected. Financially. The settlement from the contract plus additional security. Kwan has no reason to pursue you if there's no marriage to undermine." He paused. "You'd be safe. You'd have everything you need to start again." The words were careful, considered. The words of a man who had thought this through completely. I looked at him standing at the window with the city behind him and his jacket still on. "Is that what you want?" I said. He didn't answer. That was the answer. "Hein Jin." He turned from the window then, looked at me directly, and for the first time since I'd known him, since the event, since the door, since the contract and the courthouse and all the quiet meals and the reading glasses and the hand near mine on the table. For the first time, he looked uncertain, not about the situation, about himself. "What I want," he said carefully, "is not the same as what is clean, or safe, or strategically correct. Tell me what you want," I said. A long silence. "I want to keep you," he said. Quiet. Straight. No decoration. Not the marriage, not the arrangement. You. "I want to keep you." The room was very still. "But if keeping you costs you your safety..." He stopped. Something moved through his expression. "That's not a cost I'll ask you to carry." I stood up, crossed the room slowly, stopped in front of him the way he'd stopped in front of me 3 days ago, close. "What if I don't want the clean option?" I said. He looked at me. "Tayana, what if I'm done being the practical choice, the safe exit, the thing that gets set aside when things get complicated?" My voice was steady, certain. "I'm done making it easy for you to let me go." I stopped there. Didn't ask for anything. Didn't direct anything. Just said my truth and stood in it. The room was very still. He didn't move. Neither did I. Then something moved through his face. Deep. Decided. Final. He'd already decided. He just needed to say it out loud. "I'm going at Kwan," he said. "Publicly. Tonight." No question in it. No request for permission. Just him choosing. Completely. The 12 years he'd spent building something careful and quiet, he was putting it on the line. For me. Something broke open in his expression then. Not dramatically, not loudly, just opened. He reached for me. his hand coming up to the side of my face. Slow, deliberate, like he was making sure I was real, like he was making sure I wasn't going to step back. I didn't step back. His thumb moved across my cheek. Just once. Just slightly. Naigjeos, he said quietly. Mine. The word landed in my chest like something I'd been waiting to hear my whole life. Not a claim. A confession. My breath caught. Hein-jin. I know, he said. I know what I'm doing. He pressed his forehead to mine. Stood there for a moment in the gray and orange light of the city coming through the window. His hand on my face. My hands finding the front of his jacket without deciding to. I fell, he said quietly, against my forehead, almost to himself. I don't know when, but I fell. My throat was so tight I couldn't speak, so I didn't. I just stayed. Close to him in the fading light with the city moving outside like none of this was happening, and his forehead against mine and his hand on my face. Everything that had started with a lie transformed into something neither of us had planned, something neither of us could put back. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes dark and certain and asking something his voice hadn't yet. I answered it, not with words. I closed the distance, and the city went quiet around us, and everything else fell away. I found out on a Thursday, not from him. That was the thing about Hein-jin. He never led with what it cost him, never placed his sacrifices on the table and waited for you to acknowledge them. He just did what he decided to do, and moved forward, and expected nothing back. I found out from Denise, of course I did. She called at 7 in the morning the way she always called when she had information that couldn't wait. Breathless, certain, already 3 sentences in before I'd fully woken up. Tayana, are you online right now? It's 7, Denise. Get online. Kwan's story had run, early that morning, a carefully placed piece in a financial publication, exactly what Hein-jin had predicted. My name, the failed salon, Matthew, all of it framed precisely to suggest instability, vulnerability, poor judgment. It had run. And then something else had happened. 2 hours after the story published, Hein-jin had responded. Not quietly, not through intermediaries, not with a carefully managed statement delivered by someone whose job was to smooth things over. Personally, publicly, on record. He had called a meeting with the 3 men whose agreements had been at stake, had walked in alone, had laid out, clearly, completely, without apology. Exactly who I was, where I came from, what I'd built, what Matthew had taken, how I'd climbed back. He told them the marriage wasn't a liability, it was the best decision he'd made. And then he'd done something that nobody in his circle had expected. He'd withdrawn from a pending alliance, a large one that had been in negotiation for 8 months, a deal that, according to Denise's breathless summary, and the 3 articles I was now reading simultaneously, represented a significant shift in his positioning. He'd walked away from it, because the man on the other side had been at that dinner, the one with his mother, the one with the woman in ivory, the one who had sat at that table and watched Hein-jin's mother deliver her message and said nothing. Hein-jin had walked away from 8 months of work, because that man had watched them try to replace me, and hadn't moved. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hands and the morning light coming through the curtains and something happening in my chest that I didn't have a clean word for. He hadn't told me. He'd just done it. He was in the kitchen when I came out, coffee already made, his usual morning stillness, papers on the table, reading glasses on, like it was any other Thursday. I stood in the doorway and looked at him for a moment. He looked up, read my face the way he always read my face. You saw, he said. Denise called. He nodded once, looked back at his papers. You walked away from the alliance, I said. Yes. 8 months of work. Yes. You didn't tell me you were going to do that. He took off his glasses, set them on the table, looked at me, directly. Would you have let me? He said. I opened my mouth, closed it. He knew me better than I'd given him permission to. That should have unsettled me. Instead, it felt like something I'd been waiting for. He was right. I would have told him not to, would have said it was too much, would have found a way to make it smaller, to protect him from a cost I felt responsible for. He knew that, so he hadn't asked. I crossed the kitchen slowly, pulled out the chair beside him, not across from him, beside him, and sat down. He watched me do it, didn't say anything. Tell me what it actually cost you, I said. All of it. Don't manage it. Don't make it smaller. Tell me. He was quiet for a moment. The alliance was worth walking away from, he said. The man wasn't trustworthy. I knew that before last night confirmed it. That's not what I asked. A pause. My mother isn't speaking to me, he said. She will again, eventually. But not soon. He looked at the table. 2 associates have questions about my judgment. That will take time to rebuild. He paused. Quan is neutralized. The story landed, but the response landed harder. He overplayed his hand. That's finished. And the rest? I said. The things you're not listing. He looked at me. The rest, he said quietly. I'd do again. My throat tightened. Hein Jin. You asked me to tell you, he said. I'm telling you, I'd do it again. All of it. Without hesitation. I looked at this man. This particular impossible man. Who had walked into my apartment uninvited and turned my life completely sideways. Who had negotiated a contract with the same focus he brought to everything, and then quietly ignored the parts of it that kept him at a distance. Who had once moved the mugs back one morning. I'd once seen him do it and thought nothing of it, and I only understood just now that he'd been making sure I'd keep moving them back. Keep having a reason to make the kitchen mine. Who had spent 12 years building something careful and deliberate, and had put pieces of it on the line on a Thursday morning without telling me, because he knew I'd try to stop him. Who had fallen, he didn't know when, and told me so, with his forehead against mine in fading light. I reached across the table, took his hand, not close to it, not almost. His hand, both of mine around it. He looked down at our hands, then up at me. Something in his face went very still, the careful kind of still, the kind that meant something was being held together by concentration alone. I didn't come into this planning to feel anything, I said. My voice was quiet, even. I came in surviving, protecting myself, waiting for the part where you showed me who you actually were, so I could go back to knowing this was temporary. He didn't move. But you kept being this, I said, consistently, without performance. You just kept being exactly who you are. And I ran out of reasons not to believe it. His hand turned in mine, held on. I'm not good at this, I said, at trusting it, at letting someone, at letting you. I stopped, tried again. But I'm here. I'm choosing to be here. Not the contract, not the arrangement. I looked at him directly. You. Something broke open in his face, the same way it had broken open the night before, but deeper this time. He lifted our joined hands, pressed his mouth to my knuckles, slow, deliberate. Stayed there for a moment with his eyes closed. Dangsinen ne Goya, he said quietly against my hand. You are mine, and you're mine, I said. He looked up, and for the first time, the very first time since I'd walked across a room I wasn't supposed to still be in, and told the most consequential lie of my life, Chan Hein-jin smiled. Not the controlled, almost smile I'd catalogued over weeks of careful distance. A real one. Full. Certain. Unguarded. And it was the most dangerous thing I'd ever seen, because I felt it everywhere. I leaned forward. He met me halfway. And outside the kitchen window, the city went on doing what cities do. Loud and indifferent and completely unaware that in one quiet apartment on an ordinary Thursday morning, a woman who had spent her whole life being optional had finally, completely been chosen. Not temporarily, not conveniently, but all the way. And we've come to the end of it. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next one.